Let's get cracking. Hello and welcome to episode 40 of Great Things with Great Tech, the podcast highlighting companies doing great things with great technology. My name's Anthony Spiteri, and in this episode, we're talking to a company whose vision it is to make decentralized storage accessible and easy for everyone. They are doing this by building a scalable, secure, and performant access layer to various decentralized storage networks with a familiar S3 compatible interface. That company is FileBase, and I'm talking to Josh Noble, the co-founder and CEO at FileBase. Welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thanks, Anthony, for having me. Glad
Excellent. Yeah, so look, just before we get more into this crazy world, which I've been pretty deep in over the last couple of weeks in terms of Great Things with Great Tech episodes, but just as a reminder, if you like Great Things with Great Tech and would like to feature in future episodes, you can click on the link in the show notes or go to launch.gtwgt.com and register your interest. And also, as usual, please hit the subscribe button on YouTube to get up to date with all the episodes that are upcoming for the new year in 2022. This will be the final episode for 2021. And you can obviously get all the previous episodes on there. And also on the podcast station hosted by Anchor and distributed across all podcast platforms. So, Josh, with that, this is actually interesting because I did an episode 39 with your co-founder, Zach Cohen. And in that episode, we kind of talked about decentralized storage as an idea. We tried to debunk the myths around it, and it was a really good episode. This episode's all about FileBase, though, right? About the company that you and Josh founded and started in 2018, officially launched on May 17th. And then you got your first little exposure via ShareCoin. We'll talk about ShareCoin on Reddit in 2019. Yep. But just maybe before that, just maybe give a background about yourself and how you came to sort of be in this crazy world of decentralized storage and blockchain.
Sure, absolutely. Well, myself, I've been in the software engineering world for almost 20 years now, give or take. Always spent my time working on teams that are building backend scalable web applications and services, mostly on the backend side of things. Worked at a few companies in my day, most notably Constant Contact, helping them build out their email marketing platform, sending billions of emails a day. And then after that, LogMeIn, helping them build out some remote connectivity services for screen sharing. And I was on the team that built the Join.me screen sharing product.
Very early. Brilliant. I did use that. I used that back in the day.
Yep, very early version of something like Zoom equivalent, right? And helped the team there build out the SIP audio video conferencing platform that supported that product. So Decentralized Storage caught my eye around 2015 or so when a number of these projects kind of started to emerge. Myself, I've been in crypto for a little over 10 years now, actually. I've been following Bitcoin and blockchain specifically very early on.
Okay.
And around 2015 timeframe, when decentralized storage started to emerge, and some of these projects started to publish white papers around their goals and ambitions around building an actual decentralized storage network, that really caught my eye because it was one of the first times where we saw cryptocurrency being in really blockchain technology or distributed ledger technology being used to power something other than simply transfer of value or financial transactions and things like that. And that really caught my eye because we could have this, decentralized marketplace where people from around the world could participate and offer their capacity, or could come and rent or lease capacity from these networks using cryptocurrency. And the beauty, of course, of cryptocurrency, I like to say often, is that it's no one knows which one's going to win, right? But these things are global. This is a global phenomenon. This is not constrained to a specific country or region. This is a global thing that anyone can participate in. And because of that, I think these technologies are here to stay for the long term. And so we were following decentralized storage around 2017 timeframe. Some of these projects began to start publishing actual software. Early implementations actually worked. I believe you yourself may have tried Saya early on.
Saya, that's right. Yeah, I actually obviously being in storage myself and backup and whatnot, and I really got into crypto in about 2016, so I missed that early boat. Who knows what would have happened if I'd gotten a bit earlier. But, I always was interested in the technology side of it as well, much like yourself, right? So not just, obviously the crypto, the currency side, the store of value was interesting, but just understanding that you could in theory, use it for something good, and that this was potentially the future got me into the Sia coin, right? So this is the one that you obviously discovered as well.
Yeah, Sia was the first one that I discovered personally. It, as far as I'm aware, is probably one of the first networks that actually had a working implementation at a basic level of being able to rent capacity on a decentralized network, pay for that capacity with a cryptocurrency or token, or in this case, coin. And so around 2017, I downloaded the Sia blockchain, just like it sounds like yourself did, tried to set everything up, and it worked, but there's a little clunkiness to it. There was a little bit of technical complexity. And it kind of said to myself, wouldn't there be a great opportunity here to kind of automate some of this and kind of abstract away some of this complexity? And so Zach and I teamed up to kind of build something in that space. The very early version of FileBase, actually, believe it or not, was focused specifically on Sia network. And it was actually an early iteration or working name we had was actually called Sia Sync.
Okay.
Believe it or not.
Yeah.
And we built out an S3 API layer implementation. We kind of picked the S3 API as kind of, the gold standard of how to store data with modern cloud native web services and applications. And we figured if we could build this translation layer that plugged into, the thousands of different backup tools, application SDKs and frameworks that were already out there, we could very easily bridge this gap between Web 2 and Web 3, and we could easily trickle traffic over and storage over. And so we built that implementation layer that translates from S3 over to placing data on Sia. And then we quickly realized, wait a second, we could do this for not just Sia, we could do this for multiple networks. And so we made a few small code changes to the platform, and we decided to package things up in a modular fashion in our code base. And what that means is we have the ability over time to kind of expand our platform horizontally and add new networks as we go on. And so we've added support for Skynet, which is an extension, I'd like to say, of the Sia network. And then we've added support for the storage network as well. And we actually have a few others. We actually have 2 or 3 other networks in development at the moment.
Excellent.
We're looking to onboard soon. So it's been a fun ride, that's for sure.
Yeah, taking it a step back. So when you're writing that layer, so just talk about the fundamentals of what that means, because obviously you're like today's world, we talk about it as bridging Web 2 to Web 3, right? Like, and I think it's becoming more of a known concept or a known, turn of phrase, right? But in 2017, that really wasn't a thing, or 2018, it wasn't a thing. So what were the fundamentals of what did you need to do to be able to write a bit of software that interacted with a user to get a file, S3 compatible, and then somehow make it land on Sia?
Great question. So at a high level, like we obviously shared, the API that interfaces with users, or really the software that users are using, is S3 compatible. So the first thing we need to do is kind of open that front door, which is our S3 API. And so we had to build our own S3 compatible API using backend tools and software. And we use a number of different technologies to power our platform, everything from Ruby on Rails to Node.js to Lua to JavaScript, all of the above. And so we chose early on to build our own S3 API. There are a few different open source implementations out there, such as Min.io and a few others. But we wanted the freedom to be able to expand the platform, to be able to use the API in whatever fashion that we wanted. We didn't want to be restricted by any type of license restrictions and things like that. So we opted to build our own translation layer, and essentially data comes into our platform. We temporarily will save that data onto an upload or an ingress caching layer, so we can maintain very fast write speed for write operations. And then that data is placed into a backend queue or a backend data pipeline, and we're able to then propagate it to the network of choice in the background. And so we're not stuck blocking a user from performing a write operation. And to make that whole process take place, each network has their own individual API that's specific to the network implementation itself. So Sia has an API, the storage network has an API, Filecoin, Arweave, they all have their own APIs. And so we basically have to build API interface adapters internally that interface all these different networks, and we kind of figure out, okay, this file is going to Filecoin or it's going to Sia, send it down this code path. And we have interfaces that kind of work with all these different networks internally. And that allows us to kind of send and receive data from each network as well. So these interfaces is used on the upload side, but also, of course, on the download side as well.
Yeah, because I want to get into the caching a little bit later on. We've got a few things to cover around that, but just to round off the history, because I think it's pretty cool. Because you guys, obviously starting an entity like this is kind of brave, right, in this world, because there's so much skepticism and doubt and FUD basically around crypto, right? It's got a bad rep for those that aren't deep into it, right, and enjoy what it actually is. There's two sides to it. There's the crazy NFT world and the DeFi world that's blown up over the last couple of years. And then there's the actual real technology side of it, which, will fundamentally change the way in which we do things moving forward from a technology point of view, right? So what made you go and say, yes, I want to do this. I want to take the plunge on, betting on where crypto and where blockchain technology is going in the future?
I think the biggest thing for me actually came from an early example of really what everybody was pushing for Bitcoin, actually, which was, Bitcoin obviously kind of being the first, leader of the batch here, obviously not related to decentralized storage, but using blockchain technology, the ability to send value, or really to send Bitcoin from one individual to another almost instantaneously, halfway around the world, without having to trust the middleman. To me, that has intrinsic value. And a lot of people ask me, why is Bitcoin worth so much? Why is this coin worth so much or so little? There's nothing specific about Bitcoin, in my opinion, that makes it or gives it intrinsic value. But the ability to transfer that coin or that token from one party to another without having to trust that middleman, that has intrinsic value. And if Bitcoin is the first implementation of that, to me, that kind of gives it intrinsic value by default.
Get it.
And that concept I thought was very powerful when it is applied to a decentralized storage marketplace, where renters, such as FileBase in this case, we are essentially a large renter in this ecosystem of renting storage capacity. But all of these different node operators or miners or hosts who are offering capacity up to the network, they're able to set their own pricing terms. They can choose how much they want to charge per gigabyte or per terabyte on a monthly basis. And essentially, if their pricing isn't aggressive enough, they won't get any storage contracts fulfilled on their nodes, right? And so they are essentially competing with other nodes on the network in almost like a reverse auction type process, where they're bidding against each other to kind of offer the lowest price so they can have storage contracts fulfilled on their nodes. To them, it equals revenue. But to us, it also equals very cost-effective storage pricing. And we're able to kind of leverage that to our ability and kind of pass those savings on to the end user. And that's kind of like the whole premise behind FileBase. There's a lot of additional huge benefits that come along with this, such as, making sure data is highly available because we can spread it throughout the world using geo-redundancy erasure coding. But at the end of the day, a lot of people really do just want cheap storage. And we, of course, are happy to offer that. But we think a lot of the technology benefits, like high availability and redundancy, will really make a big impact for the longer term.
Yeah, so high availability, redundancy, scalability, security as well is a big one that Zach and I talked about in that previous episode. Price is obviously quite huge because at the end of the day, and I know this quite well, is that and the term that I've come to use more and more since I've been working, with a lot more Americans, is pennies in the dollar, right? Like people just want the cheapest they can get, So, and if you can offer that, but if you can offer that with the same benefits that the more expensive version of that offers, then they're obviously going to go for that. Now, some people don't care because they just want the cheapest, but when we're starting to talk about more serious use cases around enterprise, managed services, that sort of thing, storing backups, storing critical data, that's when not only price comes into play, but also what you talked about, availability, redundancy, security. So that's the premise of why I think, that you've gone down this path. So it completely makes sense. Quick note on the name. Is it a homage to Coinbase at all, or is it just...
It actually isn't. We went back and forth. So like I mentioned earlier, we initially were thinking about using SIA Sync, and then we said, wait a second, we can make this multi-network.
Lock yourself in,
the network. Yeah, let's choose a network specific name. And we really just threw around a whole bunch of name ideas. We threw around a whole bunch of logo ideas as well to see what kind of worked. And we just kind of settled on FileBase, and it's kind of stuck ever since. So.
It works, yeah, it works. I think for me, I think it does parallel to Coinbase as well, being one of the highlights of this successful blockchain company at the moment out there. IPO'd and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it works. But no, it's a cool name as well. But
it's actually, and to extend that, so to extend upon that actually, so Coinbase obviously focused on buying and selling crypto. There's another great company out there, Namebase, Namebase.io. They focus specifically on acquiring. They're essentially a domain registrar for Handshake domains, and so I
know Handshake, yeah,
much like us, but for the Handshake domain world. So they are a layer 2 solution on top of decentralized DNS. FileBase, we are a layer 2 solution on top of decentralized storage network. So the base, the trailing base name there is kind of sticking to these.
It does. It works. It works. So in terms of, what you've been able to achieve in this short period of time, you've already, you've been a finalist in Storage Magazine 2019 Product of the Year. You've kind of gone most exciting data storage and sharing platform in hackathons. And so you've really been able to build up a name within the community and get the accolades, which is obviously significant because, that's what you want to be able to build a successful company on. Where are you guys at in terms of, company growth, customer? I mean, obviously don't want to be specific, but where are you guys at, and where do you want to take the company from this point forward?
That's a great question. So the biggest growth metric that we look at is the amount of data that we're able to onboard to these networks for all of our customers. So today we have a little under 10,000 customers currently using the platform on a daily basis. And across the board, we are approaching petabyte scale across all the networks that we support. We don't publish specific metrics on a network basis currently. We are actually working on a project to hopefully one day expose some of those metrics, because we do want to showcase our abilities and what we've been able to do. And I think once we share some of those data, those numbers, and some of those graphs, I think people will realize how big of a role FileBase has kind of played in this ecosystem. And we kind of want to take that momentum that we've been able to capture really off of, I guess you could say, really the 2 networks we support today at the foundational layer, SIA and storage. We want to take that momentum and apply that to additional networks that we're building out support for. So when we look at growth, we also look at what networks do we actually support under the hood. So we're actively working on a Filecoin integration.
Yep.
And we're also working on a Arweave integration, and we're also working on a IPFS integration.
Beautiful.
And, I think you spoke with Zach maybe briefly about IPFS a little bit, but what a lot of people don't realize is IPFS is more of a data transmission protocol. IPFS is not a decentralized network itself. And so we have this interesting NFT and decentralized storage ecosystem where people want to store data maybe and mint something on a blockchain and reference, or mint an NFT on a blockchain and reference that NFT somehow, whether it be an image or some other type of media or asset. And they will typically use IPFS to do that. One of the challenges that we see, however, is that some of the largest IPFS pinning services out there actually use centralized storage providers under the hood. So
there was an example of this, wasn't there? There was an example of this a couple of weeks ago. One of the biggest ones went down, and basically everyone's NFTs literally disappeared, and a lot of people freaked out.
Yep. Yeah. And essentially what's happening is you have these providers who are spinning up massive IPFS pinning nodes, and they're offering up an API that's either free or low cost to pin the data. But the challenge then becomes that IPFS node is just using Amazon S3 for its data store layer. And so we've almost, in a sense, kind of gone full circle here. Like, why not just give the person the S3 link directly, the HTTP link directly? But when Amazon went down last week, some of these providers, had trouble, and people were kind of scratching their heads thinking, why doesn't this IPFS link work right now? And, the problem is it's being backed by centralized storage. And so one of the really big projects we're working on is adding support for IPFS to the FileBase platform, allowing you to upload any file through the dashboard or through our S3 compatible API, allowing you to pin that file on IPFS, but the pinned file is actually backed by a decentralized network. And so we're working on a connector where you'll be able to pin data on IPFS, get that IPFS CID or content ID link, but under the hood, it's actually being pinned on Filecoin or being pinned on storage or SIA or Skynet. So we think
does that mean that if your layer goes down, it's still accessible? Is that
Yes.
kind of what that?
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it.
That's what we're working for. Yep.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it, right? Because that's kind of the whole thing. Because to a certain extent, you know, your sort of gateway services, you know, there's a certain element of traditional risk there, right, versus a decentralized area. So if you can circumvent that and offer the ability for someone to get to their data just in case, that's beautiful.
Yep, absolutely. And we do that for a couple of networks we support today, like the Skynet network, for example. If you put data into a Skynet-based bucket on the FileBase platform, we'll give you direct access to the Skylink.
I saw that, yeah.
Data. You don't even have to go through the FileBase API at all. You can fetch the data yourself directly, run a node, use a community supported portal, etc. But we want to take these kind of primitives that some of these decentralized networks offer, and we want to provide our users access to them, because these are things that a centralized provider like an Amazon or another, they don't have access to some of these primitives, right? And so we want to capitalize on that and really expose how these data sets are being hosted in a decentralized manner.
Do you think that the centralized public clouds like your Amazons, your Azures, your Google, whatever else, do you think they're going to get into this space as well eventually, or is it something where I listened to a podcast yesterday. It was a AZ16 podcast on just advanced data center design. It had Martin Casado on. It was a really interesting listen about how they can scale their own equipment, the networking to build these highly scalable cloud platforms. I kind of get a feeling that the more they do that, the more they kind of are enclosing themselves into centralization. But do you see them ever breaking out and offering this like you guys are, or is this the realm of the new guys?
I think this is, I think it's going to be challenging. I don't really see Amazon hopping into the decentralized storage world per se. I believe they already have a few enterprise type level services that allow you to spin up, your own Ethereum private blockchain, things like that.
Yeah.
So I do see some services emerging there in the, hosting your own private blockchain space for supply chain tracking internally, things like that. But when it comes to decentralized storage specifically, I don't think they'll make the jump. And I think really it comes down to their bread and butter is building data centers. They do a really good job at it. It's expensive, but they do a great job at it. And I think they're going to stick to what they know best. And really at the end of the day for them, if they're able to charge a certain price for storage for, if they want to charge $23 per terabyte for Amazon S3, and people and enterprises are paying that, I don't see why they would shy away from that and try to make it cheaper per se.
Yeah, exactly. It's a cheap.
We're using that to our advantage, right? And we're trying to capitalize on that market. We have a famous saying internally. I don't know if Zach shared it yesterday, but we like to say Amazon's margin is our opportunity, essentially.
I think a lot of people are trying to actually say that, right? I mean, it's actually really ironic that we've gotten to a point where we talk about Amazon as being expensive or whatever, right? Because for the longest time, when I was working for an infrastructure as a service provider, and it was always, we're going to go to Amazon or Azure because they're a lot cheaper. And I always used to query that, and I go, really? Then these same people will be out and back into the infrastructure as a service, with us within 6 months because they get bill shocked and whatever. But you look at the price of storage, though. So let me break this down. The price of storage in, if you talk about the tier 2 providers. So these are the guys that I used to work for. They're roughly say 3 to 10 cents per gig, right? And then you go down to your public clouds because their scale. You're talking what's S3 like? I think you said like 0.02 cents per gig. 0.02. Right. Yeah, that's right. And then you guys, what's your per gig pricing?
So we're 0.0059 cents per gigabyte.
So that's another zero, right?
Yep, that's another zero. And so we're effectively $5.99 per terabyte when it's all said and done.
Which is crazy, right? And there's a lot of room there. And the other great thing is you don't charge for everything else under the sun, right? You're not going to charge for API calls and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so we don't have any minimum retention periods. With FileBase, we give everyone access to a 5 gigabyte free tier.
That's important.
It's important. There's no trials, there's no credit card or any limits applied to that. In fact, you actually get every feature of the product with that free tier.
That's awesome.
The only difference is you only have 5 gigabytes to play with. So you're given the full luxury of testing every feature we have and every feature we will have in the future. You can place data any network that you like. Everything's done on a per bucket basis. So when you create a storage bucket, you're able to choose what network you want that bucket to be associated with. And then down the line, every object placed into that bucket ends up on the network that you chose. And you can have multiple SIA buckets, one bucket here, one bucket there. It's all up to you to choose however you like. If you need more storage capacity, pricing is a base subscription fee. So it's $5.99 is a base subscription fee.
Yep.
That gives you access to 1 terabyte of storage and 1 terabyte of bandwidth. Your first terabyte of bandwidth is included in that pricing. And anything above that first terabyte of storage or bandwidth is charged by the gig. We have a 30-day rolling billing. It's a usage-based or metered-based billing model. So we charge you at the end of the month based on your previous 30 days usage, and it kind of scales up from there. It's simply pricing for storage and bandwidth. There's no charges for minimum retention periods. We don't charge for list object calls or put object calls. We don't charge for individual API transactions. A lot of
it's simple. It's the simple way to. It's kind of like going back to the old way, how it used to be before AWS came and just confused the hell out of everybody.
Yep. And you even have other S3 compatible platforms now that will take some of the API transactions that Amazon does charge for and then split them into different transaction groups. So you have like Class A, Class B, Class C.
Yeah.
All have these different price points, and to chart what your predicted usage is going to be. You have to start writing this out and start doing a bunch of math to figure out what your future bill is going to look like. And we think that's a little too much to ask for the end user, whether they're a small scale independent application developer or they're a large 500 petabyte scale MSP using enterprise backup software with our platform. We kind of run the gamut, and we support folks on different ends of the spectrum, on both ends of the spectrum here.
Yeah, and also you guys, you support, the use cases obviously there for backup vendors as well. If you go to your website, to your doc page, you're out of the box supporting a number of different. You've got partnerships, I suppose they're called, right? In terms of you've got how-tos and how to integrate with all sorts of different backup integrations, platforms, and just explain a bit about that. Is that obviously that's a bit of low-hanging fruit, but what sort of traction are you getting with that? And maybe name some of the partners there. Obviously, I know that you guys have got something with the company I work for, Veeam, but there's no problems naming anyone else there. This is an open is an open podcast, right?
We have 2 big use cases that we see a lot of traction with. The first is sometimes we'll call it backup as a service, but really using FileBase as the backup endpoint or disaster recovery endpoint for folks that already have a backup policy in place. Because we're S3 compatible, the benefit of all these integrations I'm about to cover, people aren't changing code or anything like that. They're just changing configuration. They're changing their server endpoint URL, their access key, and their secret key. And that automatically plugs right into whether it be, Veeam, Commvault, the Amazon SDK of any language stack that you can think of, AWS CLI, Arc. There's a number of different Arc clones. There's a million applications out there that work with S3 platforms. And so the first use case is really backup and disaster recovery, using us as a cost-effective backup repository. I know a lot of folks use us with Veeam, for example, as a scale-out backup repository.
Yep, which I've used and it works really well.
Yeah, I think I've actually, did I come across one of your blog posts, I think? When you
that was early on, I came across you guys,
Yeah, and so they're using us as a cost-effective backup target, and that has a lot of traction from a data volume perspective. So that's probably our leading use case from a volume of storage perspective. From a access frequency or bandwidth usage perspective, we have a lot of traction in hosting static content and static assets for folks. So these are folks who have a website that has static assets, whether it be videos, images, documents, things like that. And they need to host them on some type of global CDN-like platform. They might be using FileBase as a CDN directly, and we'll be doing some work that we can discuss later to kind of enhance that use case. But we also have another number of providers that use us as an object storage platform and put a CDN in front of that endpoint. So they'll use us with Cloudflare or Fastly or Bunny CDN.
Okay,
we are the origin in this case, in the CDN use case. And so we have a great customer of ours is cardmarket.com, which is one of the Europe's leading trading card marketplace, right? And they have tens of millions of images stored on our platform, and they're able to do this for a really cost-effective rate. And so
they moved across from AWS, right?
They did. Yes, they. I think we have a case study on them on our website linked. In fact, there's a little Easter egg on our website. If you see the Card Market logo on our homepage, if you click the Card Market logo, it'll take you right to their use case. It's a little Easter egg
cool.
for you.
Yeah, I'll link all of that in the show notes as well, so people can get to it. Plus all the free 5 gigs and all that kind of stuff as well.
Sure.
Just moving through, I wanted to talk a little bit about, just very quickly and as quickly as you can, the redundancy aspect of it. So how do you achieve, from your own perspective, the redundancy, and how would you explain it to someone if they say, well, it's decentralized, what does that mean? How is redundancy achieved?
Yeah, so redundancy in this case is achieved through erasure coding overhead. So the networks we support often implement erasure coding natively, and so we're able to kind of capitalize and build on top of that. And so I'll give you a really basic example here. The SIA network by default uses a 10 of 30 erasure coding algorithm. So for folks who aren't familiar with all the technicals, if you upload a file to the FileBase platform or even to SIA directly, that file will be split into 30 different pieces. Each piece is individually encrypted with a different encryption key. And then each piece is sent to a different server or host somewhere around the world. And there are protections in place to make sure that, that all these hosts aren't on the same network or say data center, they're actually spread out. And so the 10 of 30 erasure coding scheme basically calls for 30 pieces total, and we're calculating data pieces and parity pieces here. But the 10 part of that erasure coding scheme means we only need 10 of those 30 pieces available to actually reconstruct and download the file. And so effectively, when you have a 10 of 30, you can do 30 divided by 10, which is 3. So we have a 3x overhead, which essentially translates to a 3x redundancy level. The difference here, and data center providers like Amazon and others, they're absolutely using erasure coding technologies within a specific data center or within a specific region or availability zone. The difference with decentralized storage and how we're doing it is that erasure coding is done on a global scale. So if one piece is missing from a server, say in the United States, in Florida, the state of Florida, we can go to a different server somewhere around the world, whether it be in the country of the US, it could be in Germany, it could be in Australia, and we're able to fetch that missing shard from that erasure coding profile and reconstruct the file and process that download. Sometimes these pieces go offline, so we have an automatic process that runs in the background that kind of repairs any missing pieces. But the hosts on these networks, they're financially incentivized through these blockchain SLAs, essentially as a cryptographic service level agreement. They're putting up collateral and they're financially incentivized to keep the data online. And if they go offline for a certain amount of time, they're penalized and they have to kind of forfeit some of that collateral. So they are being paid to keep that data online, but just highly available too.
So from a speed perspective, what happens if you've got, because we're talking about the shards that are everywhere, what happens if you've got to reconstruct something and it's one piece is in Perth, one piece is in Boston, the piece is in London? Like how do you reconstitute that quick enough? I guess it's a time to first byte situation.
It is. It's a time to first byte situation. And what we've done, there's no hiding. Writing data or downloading data from a decentralized network at times there can be latency involved. There's no hiding that. And so because of that, we spend a lot of time developing our caching layer. So when you send us data, we cache it. We don't make you wait for the upload to happen. Then we upload in the background. The same thing happens on the download. So if you download a file from us, we're able to watch usage patterns and detect recently and frequently accessed files. Cool. If a file has been downloaded frequently, we'll cache that file. So future downloads actually won't have to go out to the network to stream it. And when files are cached in our download layer, it actually means that we don't have to pay a transaction fee to the network, which actually means we pass that savings on to the customer, and we won't charge the customer for bandwidth in that equation. So we're able to actually provide some pretty significant bandwidth savings as well, in addition to cost savings because of that.
That's awesome. And the UI and the interface is very sleek. It's simple but effective. I mean, it's not trying to be overly complex. I find it just intuitive. And you've got, obviously, you go in there, you create your buckets, you choose what network. So you've got the ability to choose if you want to use the CR, the Skynet, or the Storage, and then you basically create the buckets and then go from there. And then even you've got these concept of object maps. I think, is it for storage at the moment? You've got the object maps?
It's for the storage network at the moment. We place an object on the network. Once it's uploaded, we'll show you all the shards and where they're located.
That's
cool.
Pretty
nifty feature. It also highlights something that's coming down the pipe, which is, today we place data globally, so it's all over the world. Data sovereignty and GDPR and things are very important to us, especially regulatory and compliance things. And so we're working on a few different geofencing features where we'll be able to still use a decentralized network, but only place data on nodes that exist within a specific geographic region, whether it be within the country or a specific continent. So all that's coming down the pipeline. We're actually really excited for when some of this new features around that get released.
That's awesome. Looking forward to that. All right, so just let's change gears a bit and talk a little bit about the partnerships that you've done. You've had a few hackathons with Akash. Maybe just explain what you're doing around there. And I guess what this is doing really is you're just trying to educate the market, trying to get people to look at Web3 and how different levels of technology can work together. It's not just storage, but Akash does more, I guess, development platform stuff. Is that what they do?
Yeah, so Akash is focused specifically on decentralized compute, actually. So in a natural, traditional cloud world, you have a compute platform, you have a storage platform, and in some cases, you have a cloud provider that can provide both, like Amazon. But in the decentralized world, some of these technologies are so early stage that we have projects that are solely focused on specific verticals. So Akash is focused on decentralized compute. They allow you to have a network that's decentralized that allows you to run essentially Docker containers. So if you have a typical Docker container image, you can run it on Akash and utilize compute resources that are provided from other participants within their network. And we thought it was a natural fit to kind of pair decentralized compute and centralized storage together, not only for the obvious reasons, of course, but a lot of folks don't realize that Docker containers by default are actually stateless. So if you're running a Docker container that's like a database or save some type of state to, or information about session to a local disk, when that container gets wiped or restarted, it gets wiped. That ephemeral file system goes away. And so they were looking for a persistent storage solution, and we worked with their team to build out a number of different example integrations. And then to further upon that, we had a hackathon where a number of folks created applications that ran on their decentralized compute layer, but then used FileBase as a way to kind of back up data and store persistently. Exactly.
That's awesome. Yeah. And what about, that just leads me naturally into the question about Kubernetes. And I mean, I think I see it on the site. What are you guys doing around that?
Great question. So we actually use Kubernetes ourselves. All the services that we write to power the FileBase platform are run on Kubernetes. We have different clusters running around the world. All the blockchain infrastructure that we have to run, so all the storage nodes or SIA nodes and upcoming Filecoin nodes and things like that we need to be actually actively running as participants in the network. We run all those as containers as well within Kubernetes clusters. On the customer-facing side, we're working with a number of different backup software providers in the Kubernetes space. One of the biggest ones being Valero, where you can essentially back up a Kubernetes cluster and all of its etcd state information to a S3 compatible object storage platform. So,
does that mean you guys will have your own? We have your own CSI.
I'm sorry.
We have your own CSI, your storage interface.
So we've looked into that. We actually have a few implementations that. I believe the MinIO CSI adapter works with any type of S3 compatible provider. So I think we've actually tested that already. It does work. But that's something that we've been looking to introduce actually, is offering our own CSI plugin, allowing folks to mount a volume directly on FileBase into their container. And that effectively allows that container to start up on any node within the cluster because the storage doesn't have to
that is
with
awesome.
it. They're using FileBase endpoint, right? So that's the kind of the whole benefit of the CSI plugins.
And also on the flip end as well, from a backup perspective, it lets you take a snapshot more natively, and it lets you control the whole namespace gets backed up holistically. So it's actually better for it as well. So I'll be looking out for that one as well.
Awesome.
All right, look, we could talk forever. I say that in almost every episode. Actually, people must get bored of me saying that, but it's true. Everyone that I have, we could talk for hours and whatnot. But I wanted to wrap it up, and I think the last thing that I wanted to ask you was more about. We've talked about how it's pretty clear how you've gone and disrupted, how you've innovated around this decentralized storage and blockchain. What's next? How are you looking to continually? Firstly, how are you going to continually disrupt yourselves, and then how are you going to continue to innovate externally?
So I think the external innovation for us really comes from being able to introduce the S3 interface to networks and decentralized storage ecosystems where it doesn't exist at all. We are aware of a number of different parties that are looking to place very, very petabyte scale data sets onto the Filecoin network and others that need and have a hard requirement of an S3 compatible API, because that's all what their existing tooling uses, right? And a lot of these companies are moving data off of Amazon looking to save on cost while having, multiple replicas and increased security, encryption by default. And so the external innovation, I think, is going to come from that, introducing S3 compatible API to ecosystems where it just doesn't exist today. And that will allow those networks to kind of flourish, because we'll see a huge number of tools that now just kind of work right out of the box with those networks. From a disruption standpoint, I think one of the biggest innovations that we've recently wrapped up, it's partially shipped in production now. So if you upload a file, it may or may not use this code, but we've actually been working on something that we call file packing. A lot of folks might not realize, but in the decentralized storage world, a lot of these networks have minimum file sizes or sector sizes.
Yeah.
And so, small example here, on the SIA network, the sector size is 40 megabytes typically. And so if you upload a 1 megabyte image, you're left paying for the remaining 39 megabytes of padding, which you're paying for it, and you're actually uploading empty padding space to the nodes as well. So you're kind of wasting space. It's not very efficient.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Yeah, I get you. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that number is 64 megabytes on the storage network. That number is 32 gigabytes on the Filecoin network. And so we've developed a solution where we can use our caching layer to our advantage, and on a per bucket, per customer basis, so everything's isolated for each customer, we're able to pack multiple files into a single sector. And this is huge benefits, because we're able to create a scenario where storing data on a decentralized storage network is actually more cost effective or cheaper to do it through FileBase than going to the network directly. And this pays off massive dividends when you use backup softwares and suites like Commvault and Veeam, where you're backing up a data set, and Veeam will split that data set into tens, if not hundreds of millions of tiny files. And
that's what we do. Yeah.
If you have to pay 40 megabytes for each one of those files, you drive yourself crazy. These files are often a few kilobytes in size.
Yeah.
We can literally stick 100,000 files into a single sector, and get
that's huge, because actually that's massive, because in our implementation, I know we've got a couple of different block sizes, but the typical default one is one meg, but that gets compressed to 512K. So you're wasting a lot of space.
I think it's Veeam has the option of like the big block setting, which I think bumps up to like 4 megabytes or something in that realm. But it's we've done
wasting,
a lot of it's still wasting effectively on decentralized storage, and we've done a ton of testing with Veeam to see what our solution addresses. It does, but we spent months and months building this feature set out, and it's partially shipped in production now. We're finishing up the rest of it over the holidays and turning on for all the customers. But
I'm glad you've done that. That's awesome. That'll work.
Yeah.
When I'm playing with it.
That's probably the biggest disruption for us so far, coming soon.
Excellent, mate. No worries. Well, this has been awesome. I mean, I think when I combined last week's episode, which was just a general conversation, but we obviously touched on FileBase then. But this episode, talking about what you guys have done, how you started the company, how you came into being, the accolades that you've won. I mean, I didn't even mention some of the accolades, but you've really started to get noticed. I mean, in 2021 alone, you were named a leader, Decentralized Storage by Gigo, hot startup to watch. The list goes on and on, listed as one of the 10 hottest data storage startups, so by CRN. So you're there, right? And I think the one thing that you're doing, which I love, you're bringing blockchain technology into the enterprise, into the masses, which is, you're ahead of your time doing that as well, right? And that's not to say that's actually a brilliant thing, and you're way ahead of the curve, because there's so many skeptics that I know, and I think this is a great way to introduce people into the power of what blockchain can do moving forward to help enterprise businesses run.
We like to say that, or I like to say, you kind of know adoption has arrived when you're using a technology, but the end user doesn't even know it's being used on the back end, right? And so whether people are using us to easily place data onto IPFS and get Skylinks on Skynet, or they're just treating us as a cost-effective S3 compatible object storage provider, we'll take all the customers we can get, of course, but at the end of the day, this technology is here. This is not a white paper. This is something that's live in production. It's actually working. It's actually running, and we encourage everyone to try us out.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. That's awesome. So let me wrap up by saying that, again, if you'd like to subscribe, please subscribe to YouTube or to your favorite podcast platform. You can find me at Anthony Spiteri or at GTWGT Podcast on Twitter. Please follow FileBase as well on Twitter at FileBase. Visit the filebase.com. Josh mentioned you guys have got the 5 gig for free. Have you got any specials going on at the moment? I know you guys had
We do.
Yep.
So we encourage everyone to try us out. If you sign up for a premium account on FileBase, you can use the code WEB3WELCOME, all one word, and you'll get your first month of first 1 terabyte of storage free for your first month.
Beautiful.
So let's give us a try, and always happy to hear feedback.
Awesome. I'll put that in the show notes and we'll link it when we put the episode out. So just to finish off, thank you, Josh. Thanks to FileBase, and we will see you next time on Great Things with Great Tech.
Sounds great.